Why are lawyers so unhappy? Well, we've all heard the statistics. A lot of them are really unhappy. And I'm about to share with you, well, not only why lawyers are so unhappy, but what you can do about it. Now, I don't know about you, but when I first got accepted into law school, I had zero idea what I had just gotten myself into. So I remember the day very clearly. I was living in Toronto, Canada. I had applied to a law school, well, not a few law schools, and I came home from school. I was doing my master's at the time, and I saw this big, fat envelope from the University of Ottawa, and I knew that I was accepted into law school. I ripped it open. Sure enough, I got this early acceptance. I was with this friend. I grabbed her, hugged her. I was so excited. Oh my gosh, I had arrived. Coming from a working class background, I couldn't believe it. The abundance, the life I was gonna have, the riches, it was gonna be amazing. Well, little did I know that, well, I was going to have some struggles, some really big struggles. And so that's why in this recording, I'm sharing with you why lawyers are so unhappy, struggles that so many of us have faced, and what you can do about it. Like I said, the statistics are clear. Disillusioned, unhappy lawyers are leaving the profession in droves. In fact, there's a lot of lawyer coaches out there who coach other lawyers to leave the profession. Well, what if you could stay being a lawyer and not be miserable? What if you could stay being a lawyer and have a happy life, a thriving life, along with a great law practice? Well, let's dive in. First of all, well, I don't know about you, but you know that thing about how law, particularly family law, is adversarial by nature? This is what I've said probably a bajillion times by now. I work in conflict all day long, and I don't even like conflict. Being in conflict with other people, that is stressful stuff. And engaging in conflict with other lawyers, other parties, that is stressful stuff too. And that is a huge element, a huge part of our profession. As I record this, a lawyer, not a friend that I know, who I'd reached out to regarding a family law matter and a parenting dispute. And this lawyer wrote back to me and said, you know what? I've been doing this conflict crap for 12 years. I'm not doing this parenting stuff anymore. And I admire your tenacity for doing this year after year after year. So the question becomes, how do you work in a profession that has conflict while at the same time not necessarily liking conflict and being, well, somewhat risk adverse and actually liking to get along with people? One of the most powerful things that you can do to keep out of the conflict or to guide your clients through a relatively, well, often very intense process is, you may have heard me say it before, is to take dispute resolution training. As I record this, just this week, I was in court, and the other side, the lawyer, wow, has not taken any dispute resolution training. That much is true. Very combative, very fighty, wanting to set something for a hearing. And what I've wanted to do is understand what his client is angry about. Well, this lawyer won't communicate with me. I've written him letters and said, hey, let's try and resolve this. I have some ideas. Please let me know your thoughts. Have a discussion with me. Meet with me. This lawyer isn't doing any of that. Now, this is what I know about that lawyer. He's a really unhappy lawyer because he's always in the trenches, always fighting, and not getting to a resolution for his clients. So he spends a lot more time in court and a lot more time looking dumb in front of judges when the other side's saying, hey, can we talk about this? Can we resolve this? Can we move forward in a way that's going to work for this family? So when you take dispute resolution training, what ends up happening is you end up getting very curious about the other side's position. when people have a position, draw a line in the sand. You know what? You find out what that line in the sand is about, and you try to figure out ways to resolve what caused that person to draw the line in the sand so that you don't have to do this zero-sum game. You have a situation where maybe you and the other lawyer, you and the other party can come up with a resolution that's going to serve your family. And maybe you're going to come up with a resolution that's going to serve the family that you are assisting. So, yes, conflict is part of our profession. However, how we deal with that conflict, how we engage with that conflict can really help transform our experience as lawyers while practicing family law. A second reason why lawyers are so unhappy, well, it can be a very emotionally taxing experience, just being in the practice of family law. Now, one of the things that I had happen over the last couple of weeks, I have this case, and let's just say in my over 25 years of practice, the other party, my client's ex, is the highest conflict person I have ever come across. I mean, wow, this person is high conflict, really combative, really fighty. And the thing is that, well, this person was the first thing I thought about when I woke up. This is 2 weeks ago, when I woke up in the morning. Now, that's emotionally taxing. In that particular case, I was actually in the process of preparing materials to go to court to obtain a protection order. How many times have I obtained a protection order? Less than 5 times in over 25 years, where I've gone to court and said, if this person continues to contact my client, they need to go to jail because they are really scary. And so if you have those kinds of high conflict cases, they are emotionally taxing. When you're waking up in the morning and the first thing you think about is your stressful file, that is emotionally taxing. So what do you do about it? How do you deal with that so that you can maintain being happy? Well, what I do, mostly successfully, not so much a couple weeks ago, is that I build a fence around my law practice and home life. And what I mean by that is when I am home doing my morning practice, I don't look at my law emails. I don't talk to my clients in the evenings. I don't work on my law practice on weekends. That is for certain times of day only. Every other time, my emotional real estate is for my home life, my health, my developing to be the best divorce lawyer, you name it. That's what that's for. But when I'm in my practice of law, those times, that's when my clients get my 100% dedicated focus. So maybe you're thinking, that's easier said than done, Val. You know what? Try it. Try to make sure that you're not checking your emails in evenings and weekends. Try to make sure that you're only representing clients in certain hours of the day as you agree upon with your staff or your schedule or your calendar. It really, really helps. If lawyers did that, we would have a lot less unhappy lawyers in our profession. A third thing as to why lawyers are so unhappy is because a lot of them are broke. This is one of the things that happened to me, is that, well, of course, when I got into law school, thought I'd have this rich, abundant life. Let's be clear, compared to my previous career, where I was a server in a restaurant, sure, way better than that. Having said that though, wow, the financial struggles have been real and huge and a struggle. So how do you avoid being that broke lawyer? Well, you apply business principles to your law practice. What do I mean by that? Well, a lot of lawyers, well, what they do, and this is what I did, big mistake, is I worked for other law firms and, the money sucked and, I felt like my work wasn't respected. And I thought, gosh, I could go do this on my own and have a way better life. So off I go, open my own practice and having zero idea, and when I say zero, I really mean zero, about how to run a business. So all of a sudden now I have, taxes to think about. I have source deductions for my employees, paying my employees, thinking about marketing, all these things. Well, when you treat your law practice as a business, because that's what it is, you will ensure that you have a much better bottom line and the opportunity for a much better financial future. Another reason why lawyers are so unhappy is, well, they've become disillusioned. I remember one time years ago, I was still doing legal aid cases, and I remember having a knock 'em down, drag 'em out argument with another lawyer about the stupidest thing. It had to do with whether a child was going to be returned at 20 to 4 or 3:30 after school or whatever it was. And I remember thinking, I went to law school for this. I have 7 years of, education, post-secondary education, plus my master's degree, so that I can fight about 5 minutes of time. Yeah, very, very disillusioning. Now, how do you avoid that disillusionment? Well, here it is. Pretty simple, really. You don't take stupid instructions. You don't agree to have dumb fights with other lawyers about things that should be settled. There you have it. That is really a very powerful way to avoid being an unhappy lawyer. Another reason why lawyers are so unhappy is that, well, they don't take charge of their time. As you know, in family law, there is a never-ending amount of things you can do. There's always a new case, more work to do. Most lawyers, a lot of family law lawyers, are overwhelmed, stressed, overworked, tired, you name it. Now, the thing is that some people think, well, that's just the way it is. Now, I'm thinking about a lawyer I know. I'll call him Testy Tony. Now, Testy Tony has this reputation for being a gentleman. Got this high conflict, that high conflict case I talked about. Well, Testy Tony, I think it's slipping. He's been a lawyer for more than 30 years, and he told me and the arbitrator just recently that he takes work home with him absolutely every single weekend. Now think about that. Over 30 years of not taking clear weekends off, don't you think maybe his patience is wearing a bit thin? His overwhelm wearing a bit thin? The problem with Testy Tony, as far as I can see, he's a good person. No question about that. However, he's exhausted. He's overwhelmed. He has not taken time away to relax and recharge. So he thinks that's just the way it is. I'm a lawyer. I take work home with me. That's just the way it is. Well, is it though? This is what I know. Lawyers who are happy in the profession, lawyers who thrive in the profession, guess what they do? Well, they take charge of their time. Oh, hey, it's me. Interrupting a little bit because I want videos like this to reach more people. So if you are enjoying what you see, if you're finding it helpful, please hit the subscribe button, which is somewhere up there. And also tell me, what was the biggest takeaway you had with respect to this video? Leave it in the comments below and I will answer every comment, every question, because that's what I do. Believe it or not, for Testy Tony, when he thinks he has to drag a client file home with him and do work on the weekend, really, Testy Tony, I think that's a choice that you're making. Maybe you have to take on less files. Maybe you have to ensure that you only do client work between certain hours. So, as I record this, I have a thriving law practice and I don't see clients until 10 a.m. And I see clients starting at 10 a.m. Monday to Thursday. And I don't see clients on Fridays. And I don't do client work on weekends. So if you want to avoid being an unhappy lawyer, take charge of your time. Now, when I say I don't see clients on Fridays, I'm not lollygagging about sitting at the pub or sipping martinis. What I'm actually doing is working on my business, making sure that all the things that I need to focus on, whether that be my law society, the trust accounting stuff, going to the bank, calling the IT folks, whatever all those jobs are, well, those are Friday jobs. Monday to Thursday, that's my client work. Those are my client work days. When I started taking charge of my time that way, what ended up happening is my stress went way down. So think about taking charge of your time, not only for you, but for your family, your happiness, and also for the benefit of your clients. Now, when I go back to Testy Tony and I think about it, because he's so exhausted and impatient and, well, been a bit of a jerk lately, he's actually not doing the best job for his client in a way that he could have if he was well rested. So think about that for your bottom line. Think about that for your clients. Okay, now I'm going to compare Testy Tony and what it's like to deal with him to easygoing Ernie. Easygoing Ernie has also been a lawyer for 30 years. And easygoing Ernie and I attended a mediation. We resolved the matter in one day, got an executed signed agreement. Now, as far as being a lawyer goes, it was a pretty pleasant day. My client was very happy with the results and guess what? Is leaving me a really great review. Now, the thing about easygoing Ernie is that he showed up well prepared, relaxed. His client felt that easygoing Ernie knew everything he needed to know about his case. So easygoing Ernie also has really happy clients. Now, one of the things is that in this particular case, it could have been very high conflict, but wasn't because of the way easygoing Ernie showed up and the way I did. But the problem is that in this particular case, the parties, well, there was an assault and there's a no contact order. And my client needed to get some personal items to the other party, but they're not allowed, the other party is not allowed to communicate directly with my client because that would breach his probation order. So what do you do in that particular case? So I'd asked easygoing Ernie if he would consider us, because the thing is, even though these personal items had to be returned, there was an issue because where I live, we never know if it's going to be sunny or rainy or snowing. Well, no, mostly not snowing. But the point is we need to know about the weather. And my client didn't want to put out these personal items just to have them get drenched. Neither did the other party. So I suggested to easygoing Ernie, would you exchange, your cell phone number with me? Yeah, sure. Breaking my own rule. Doing some client work on the weekends so that we can communicate about whether or not this Saturday is going to work. Now, this is what easygoing Ernie said to me. I have to read it. Sorry, my personal phone number is a carefully guarded secret from my clients. Maintains sanity and weekend calls about going to court on Saturday morning because the child was dropped off missing a mitten. So I burst out laughing when I read that. But the thing is that, yeah, he's like, no, I don't give my client my personal cell phone number. Of course, he wasn't giving it to me either, by the way, but he was nice about it. And the thing is that here we have a relaxed lawyer who's living a good life and he's not miserable, even though he's a family law lawyer. Now, another reason why lawyers are so unhappy, and I've alluded to this, but I'm going to dive in more. They haven't applied business principles to their practice. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in my law firm, we have checklists and workflows and precedents for everything. If something's done more than once, we've got a checklist for it. Now, why is that a good thing? It really avoids embarrassing mistakes. If you are counting on remembering everything in your head, it's harder to delegate work to your team, your assistant if you have one. It's easy to make mistakes. In fact, before they introduced checklists to airlines, for example, well, the likelihood of crashes, airline crashes, was much higher than now because they always use checklists to ensure that everything's looked after. Same thing for surgery. When hospitals incorporated checklists into their procedures, well, the likelihood of mistakes made on the operating table and infections became less and less and less. So think about this, is most lawyers do not at all have checklists associated with their law practice. And what that means is mistakes can be made. I'm going to go back to, well, a time before I had a checklist, before I had any idea about applying business principles to my practice. And I was a relatively baby lawyer, and I had dictated, again, days before computers, I had dictated a draft order. And I had assumed when I had drafted the order, dictated it, I had assumed when I said, the child will be with mom for these times and dad at these times, I had assumed, wrongly, that my assistant would know that the order shouldn't say mom or dad, it should say claimant and respondent. So of course, when I handed the draft order to the court, I had gotten my order, he said, Miss Heminger, why do you have mom and dad written on this order? Oh my gosh, how embarrassing. The point is that I didn't have in my checklist, check the order. Very easy thing to do. Oh, in my checklist, meet with the staff when you're going to a contested court application to make sure everything's in order. Well, and of course when that happened, very embarrassing, I looked really dumb. It doesn't happen when the courtroom's empty. No, that happens when the courtroom is packed with all of my colleagues who think, wow, she's an idiot. So that wasn't great. So what I'm saying is if you want to avoid being that unhappy lawyer, use checklists everywhere you can. If you do things like, for my office, we have it for opening files, closing files, trials, hearings, four-way meetings, you name it. We go through the checklist to make sure we've covered all of our bases. When I am about to go into a contested hearing or an arbitration, I arrive, well, pretty relaxed compared to the other lawyer who's put in hours and hours and hours of time cramming, trying to get everything done just before the hearing starts. I've done all that stuff weeks before and ready to go. Yeah, it really avoids being that unhappy lawyer. The seventh reason why lawyers are so unhappy has to do with the fact that often they spend way too much time on administrative tasks. So just recently, I had a case where I had to compile some case law. Yeah, true story. I was heading off to the courthouse, but the great news is that because I used my checklist, it wasn't me standing there printing out the case law. I was able to delegate to my assistant that job, which I find pretty tedious and boring. So the thing to remember is that if you incorporate business principles to your law practice, use those precedents, use those checklists, delegate well in advance if possible, reduces your stress and ensures that you are sticking to the lawyering stuff and minimizing the amount of administrative tasks that you have to do. Another thing that makes lawyers very unhappy has to do with our fear of our governing bodies. What do I mean by that? Well, for me, it's the Law Society of British Columbia. For you, it might be what you call your bar. And that is the organization that gives you the right to, well, practice law. Because if you're not a certified lawyer, a lawyer called to your bar, or a member of your law society, as we call it where I live, well, you don't get to be a lawyer. So as I record this, I have had disciplinary proceedings that have been ongoing for almost 8 years. To say that has caused me stress, pain, embarrassment, expense, humiliation. It all relates to a financial mistake I made 12 years ago. And I'm living with the consequences of that mistake even now today. So going back to, our fear of our bar, our fear of the law society, well, what do you do about that? So this is where in comes my psychologist. Now, I respect my psychologist a lot. And coincidentally, he was involved in a case that I had. And in that case, the other party, the one that wasn't my client, reported him to his governing body, to the College of Psychologists. And I said to him, wow, that must be so stressful. Because what I know for sure is most lawyers I know live in fear of the law society or their bar all the time. Total fear. They're worried that a client's going to report them, that another lawyer is going to report them. They're so afraid. I used to be really afraid that way too. Really afraid. Oh wait, and then it happened. Really awful. And so again, going back to the story of my psychologist, I said, oh my gosh, this must be horrible for you. And he said, Val, I'm a professional. You know what? That comes with the profession. When we are members of a governing body, it's possible and likely that someone's going to report us. We're going to make a mistake or someone's just not going to like us. I'm not putting my energy into worrying about that. It comes with the territory. And I thought, wow, that is amazing. And starting right now, I'm no longer going to be stressed at all about these disciplinary proceedings that remain unresolved. Now, have I pulled that off all the time? Nope. Sometimes I still get really stressed because they've been ongoing for a long time and are expensive and stressful and embarrassing. And at the same time, what I do know in my being is that I'm doing my very, very best. And I know that, you know what, I was giving that governing body too much power over my happiness. So if you are fearful of your governing body, if you are fearful of having disciplinary proceedings, make sure that you do your best always and apply the business principles to your law practice so things go much smoother, so that mistakes don't happen, so that you don't get into financial glue like I did. And also reach out for support, because the thing is, it doesn't have to be that way. The ninth thing is, well, why lawyers are so unhappy is sometimes, despite our best efforts, it can be a pretty thankless job. Sometimes our clients, despite the hard work we do, they're unhappy with the result, or they're unhappy with us. We can't please everyone all of the time. And just like when I'm talking about the fear of your law society, of our law society or our bar, it comes with the territory. And if you are doing good work for families and doing your best, sometimes someone's going to be ticked off with you. And that just comes with the territory. So the point is not to be, well, too bent out of shape about that. I think about a writer I know. His name's Seth Godin. Very smart guy. He sold millions and millions of books, and he's considered a thought leader. He shares the story once of how he had put out a new book. It was immediately a New York Times bestseller, and he got rave reviews. And then there was this one review of a 1-star and said it was garbage and he's an idiot and all this kind of stuff. And he focused on this negative review. Well, that's what we do as lawyers sometimes, is we get really stressed out about someone who would never have been happy anyway. Ultimately, Seth's advice was, don't make it mean a lot. Sure, if it's something you can improve, of course you want to improve. And also realize that, you know what, sometimes people just aren't going to be happy, and what you can do to keep yourself happy is to not attribute a lot of meaning to that. Now finally, a lot of lawyers think being overworked, financially struggling, stressed right out, working long hours, well, that's just the way it is. When they decided to become a lawyer, particularly a family law lawyer, that having that kind of life is just, well, just the way it is. Well, what I'm going to share with you is that, does it really have to be that way? I hope by now, as I've gone on and on and on about this, that you realize it isn't just the way it is. Your answer to being an unhappy lawyer doesn't have to be that you leave the profession. What you can do to resolve being that unhappy lawyer is following the recommendations I've provided to you in this recording. Because you know what? If you apply business principles to your practice, you don't have to be overwhelmed. If you take charge of your time, you don't have to be overworked. If you accept that not everyone is going to be happy all of the time, wow, that's going to help you be a happy lawyer. This is Val. Thanks for listening. Much, much love. If you found this video helpful, and I hope you did, please give it a thumbs up. Because if you do that, then this video will be able to reach more people. And as well, if you want to stay in closer touch with me, please ring the little bell icon so that you can subscribe to this channel. This is Val. Much, much love.